Alrighty, hello, mortals. Welcome back to one of our Down the Rabbit Hole episode. We've done like maybe two of these episodes before, and it's basically condensed facts about a certain topic. And usually it gets very deep. We get very deep conversation out of this. And me and Alyssa don't really do that much research for these kind of topic. It's just basically based on our experience, on our prior knowledge, on things that we really, really want to talk about. Basically, this is the moment where we nerd out, we geeked out completely about a topic, which is sometimes good, but sometimes it can bring up very hard questions. So I hope you guys are here prepared for it. And here's Alyssa. Hi, Alyssa.
Hey, Jules. Hey, guys. Hey, mortals. What's up?
Everything is great because I just got done telling them we done only like two other down the rabbit hole episode, and these are usually very condensed conversational topics that we talk about under one subject. And this down the rabbit hole episode is inspired by the Yamauba episode from last week, which is we didn't think it would get that far, to be honest. We didn't think it would really bring up so many of these hard questions and these like very deep conversations. So yeah, this is a surprise for me.
Yeah, it was such a simple story, and so I thought we thought it would be very short and sweet, but then we ended up getting into it, and we really felt passionate about a lot of the topics that it brought up, and I feel like that's really what Down the Rabbit Hole is for. We get really passionate about a lot of the topics that we talk about, and then sometimes they go down the rabbit hole. They really get
They
deep in the
do.
research, deep in the weeds.
Because I remember we talked about the first Down the Rabbit Hole episode is in Egypt, and we were talking about simply we were just trying to tell a story about a goddess that we thought was kind of forgotten, which is Hathor. And then we ended up making a whole freaking Down the Rabbit Hole episode, and it went so far. I don't even know how we got there, but
Yeah,
we
it got to a point where we just had to stop. We were like, okay, we're gonna leave this to the historians. They've got that.
yes, it went so far. Like seriously, I never even imagined it. And today is the same thing because last week we left off of like honorifics because you were in the middle of asking me like because I grew up in a more traditional background. Like
Yeah,
my
yeah.
parents are actually from like actually are born and raised in a different country and then migrated to the United States. So how was that culture like and how are the honorifics and greetings differently and how are they more reserved? Well, in some way
And
I think it's not that different from many other culture.
oh,
Is
and before we get in that, because I do want to give the disclaimer.
uh-huh, go
Um,
ahead.
so you've already given them caught them up on Yamaba. If you haven't watched the Yamaba episode, definitely go and do that. We did tell the Yamaba story about a
Yeah,
yokai in Japan and how it basically relates to respecting your elders and what it means to be, and as Julie said, what it means to be an elder in in different countries and different places. I do want to correct something that we did say in the context of the past episode. We mentioned clarifying the word foreign since both of us are of foreign descent. Julie is Vietnamese and I am Nigerian. So I did want to clarify because before we described being foreign as not American, and I realized that we did say this because we ourselves live in America, and like I said, we have parents that are from different countries, and so that's how it classifies to us. um, but I do realize that there are, just like there are many different types of people living in countries like France or Nigeria or Vietnam. There are many different types of Americans living in America. So just wanted to clear that up, that when we do say foreign, we're going to try to refer to where specifically in the world we're talking about, because foreign means a lot of different things to different people. So just wanted to clarify that because we did mention that in the last episode, and I went back and listened, and I was like, we can't really say what is and is not American. But
well
as
it
far
wasn't thoroughly explained. Well, here's the
yeah,
thing, because I guess we have been in this country for so long. We are born and raised in this country, and we experience a lot of things. And the category like ethnicity categorizing in America is very,
Complex.
yeah, that's I think that's like the nicest word you can say, because it's really weird. And of course I'm not going to get too deep into that, but because of the way we are looking at the system, and many times we are looked at, or we are treated as foreigners, even though me and Alyssa, like many other American kids, we were born and raised in America.
and
So
and and really and honestly, we are technically, if you look at it, it does sometimes, it does make sense to me, because you are technically of two households and two minds, because in one case we are born in America, we grew up with the American culture. I can tell you a lot about the American culture and what goes on here. But then on the other hand, you have your parents who were not, and you spent so much time around them. And then of course there's communities here where you can, you go to functions, you go to different parties and things like that, and you're around a lot of your own people. And so you kind of are of two minds. There's the American mind, and I'm pretty sure anyone who has lived in more than one country can attest to this, having two different minds. One that's in the traditional, where you were raised at home, you can talk about that type of culture, and then where you actually grew up or spent most of your time.
oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Like how Alyssa asked me about, how does as far as I live, or as far as I was raised, how does the greeting goes in my home? Well, I can tell you that there are different ways to address different people in the family. And then there's different ways, like Alyssa said last week, how you would have a certain way to address the people around you, the people who aren't family and the people who are family. What kind of respects you say, what kind of respects you pay to them, and what kind of things you say to them as a greeting. And it really does affect you as a person, that when you especially be raised in more of that traditional background, that you have a certain way of approaching adults versus children versus people who are around your age. And yeah, that's a whole pyramid kind of explanation, where it goes from like the oldest to the youngest. And to be honest, the one of the questions that we raise here is that, when will you ever be old enough? I really do feel like it's a never kind of thing, because people keep saying the older you are, the more respect you're supposed to be getting. You don't get the same greetings. You get the utmost kind of respect kind of greetings. What you say to your great grandparents is different from what you say to your grandparents, and then what you say to them is different from what you say to your parents versus your siblings. So it's a whole system, if you think about it. A lot of people like me, we got trained into a whole system.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue into our first question about being older in another culture and some of the honorifics and greetings. I shared a lot of my honorifics and greetings that I remember and that I grew up. I think I shared a lot of them towards the end of the last episode. I did mention a lot of the honorifics. I didn't get to greetings, but I think you should probably start us off by, like, explaining, what are some of the honorifics or greetings that you're supposed to use, especially based on age in Vietnam, or at least that you remember having to grow up with, because there is a level to this. Like you said, we learn, especially if you're born of two households. I call it born of two households or two minds. You do grow up kind of code switching or learning how to speak to certain people in certain ways. If you see
Oh
someone
yeah, it's a
you're
very common thing. It is a very common thing. And really the greetings, it does change, of course. It does change when you are greeting your grandparents versus your parents. There are just some words that you never say to your parents. So hard to say in English, but I will try my best. Let's see. Like, say for certain words, when you tell your parents, hey, let me teach you how to do certain things. You never use the word teach to your parents, like you would never use the word respect Like you would never demand respect from your elders, or you would never use the word like I said, teach. Like never say to, like my mom always tell me growing up, like she always have to fix my vocabulary as I was a kid, but as soon as I learned them, she started kind of reprimanding me for using the wrong words. You never use the word teach to for your parents, as in, let me teach you how to do this. No, you don't say that, because you're not supposed to teach someone who is older than you. You're supposed to say, let me show you how to do this, or let me demonstrate to you how to do this. There are just certain ways that you have to address someone who's older, or you never say for a parent should respect a child or their kids, because parents don't need to respect their kids. Respect is meant for someone who's on a higher levels, as in they're older, they're an adult, they're older. So it will go as same as for my parents. My parents would never ask my grandparents to respect them. It only goes one way, and it goes up. And I think a lot of those like vocabularies, a lot of those terms were really kind of rent into my head. So even when I started learning a whole nother language, I apply them as well. Like I'm not sure those of you who are bilingual do that, but some of the terms and the vocabularies that you use in one language, you ended up transcribing or translating into the other language as well. And I find myself never using the word never using the word respect, or using the word teach, or like there's a lot of words. I could only think of those two right now. I never use those for people who are older than me. That is just like the pattern that I was so used to growing up, and I soaked it up like a sponge without really questioning it. And that's just how I was taught, respectful wise. That's how I was brought up.
And what about like honorifics? What would you call like what do you how do you refer to people who are older than you? Are there certain titles that they're expected to be given, that you're expected to call them? Like I discussed in the last podcast that if I saw an older person, you know, if she was really, really old, I'd call her grandmother or something along the lines of that.
Well, yeah, I do the same thing. Yeah, I do the same thing. If I see an older woman, I would call her grandmother. I would call her the same way that I would call my own grandma, my biological grandmother. Or I would, if I see an older man, I would have to call him grandpa. I would have to call him that one honorifics that is used for all older men. That one term that they use to address anyone who is as old as my grandpa. If I see someone who's as old as my uncle, I would call them uncle. If I see them as old as my auntie, I call them auntie. Or if I see them as old as I have can be a sister, an older sister, I have to call them older sister or younger sister, or something like that. It's always a comparison to your family for some reason. Honorifics or has something to do with your families and how you address one another.
Well, I definitely think we can definitely get to that. We'll definitely get to that in collectivistic versus individualistic society, because I think a lot of the because I did notice this, especially when I did notice that my friend group, I I didn't really notice until somebody really pointed out to me. And I think this is true with our friend group too as well, Julie, is that we have a ton of diversity. And the one thing I noticed that most of us have in common, besides like certain foods that'll sometimes overlap, is that a lot of the greetings and honorifics that we use, all like you said, they always tie back to family. And like I said, I think that has a lot to do with collectivistic culture versus like individualistic societies, like east side of the world versus the west side of the world, or the
Oh yeah.
US in particular.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I can see that.
And like how they see people, because like even if I think about it, like even the way that the adults greet each other, like I was used to hearing, like if I saw my like if my mom came across somebody the same age as her, for me as a kid, I grew up calling everybody that was my age or my age range or older, usually they were like cousin. Everybody was cousin. But when I saw my parents like speak to other people from the community, they would be like, oh, you know, my sister, or they'll refer to my mom as sister or brother for my dad. And I would see that sometimes and be confused, because sometimes I would also see like strangers talk to each other and they'd be they'd be of the same community or whatnot, and they would say, like, they would call them madame or something like that, something along the
Oh
lines
yeah.
of that. Very
Oh yeah. Definitely. But different from you is that I did not see anything wrong with it growing up. Here's the thing, because I would always see my parents calling, like my mom would call all of her girlfriends sisters, and she would call all of her male friends brothers, and my dad would do the same thing, my aunties and uncles do the same thing, even my grandparents do the same thing. But there was no differentiations at all. Like there was no explanation to me. Like they never sat baby Julie down and be like, we do this because of ABCD. They never really sat me down and say anything. There was like no differentiation, like, oh, that's your blood auntie and that is your outside auntie. There was none of that. And I just kind of grow up thinking that's absolutely normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary.
Well, see, I mean, I didn't think it was necessarily out of the ordinary, but like I said, I would notice the differences in the way people. I didn't necessarily think it was out of the ordinary because, like I said, that was the community I grew up around, so it was normal. But I do think I picked at it a little bit more, and I think I had the opportunity to pick at it a little bit more because my parents did have a little bit more. Like I would say they had more time in the U.S. I don't know, or maybe it was just their mindset. But I know, like I said, I mentioned this in the earlier podcast that my mom my mom had different honorifics that she would use for different people because of the whole which auntie is which auntie thing. And so I think because my mom grew up with that understanding, she wanted to. And my mom is very verbal. She's very she's very good about communicating with us and teaching us how to communicate how we feel in a way that's kind of respectful. So, my mom was always she was very good about like explaining why things were the way they were. And I questioned a lot of things as a kid. So I was the questioner. I always had questions. Even to this day, I still have so many questions. But so I think it wasn't necessarily that it wasn't normal to me, but it was just that, I didn't just blindly do it. It was I understood why I was doing it. And if anything, it made me feel a lot closer to home when I did do it. So I mean, I feel like having that understanding, I feel like if anything, all it did was make me feel, like I said, closer to home. It made me feel okay. It made me feel I liked it. I personally loved it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I never really cared to question it, I guess, because I was just so used to it. Like it was something very norm. Like if you go and meet someone, you say hi or something. It's just very normal to me. So it never really popped into my head the fact that, oh, it's questioning, why am I calling someone else auntie when they're not really my auntie? That's just, yeah, I guess I really just I didn't have a tick with it enough to question it. But yeah, what you said makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I do want to go back to teach because I found this very interesting that you said that you never mentioned, and I don't know if you've been able to hear me this whole time. I just realized my thing said mute or did not say mute, so I'm wondering, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I hope it did not mute it when we go back and listen to this. But either way, I did want to go back to when you said that you don't use words like teach with your elders, because I know that there are certain things that I was told, like certain actions that you cannot do. Like I know that if your elder has like a, I don't remember if this was for elders, but I know that if you see somebody with bald head and you're a kid and you're touching this grown man's head, it's considered extremely disrespectful where I'm from. So it's like I don't know. Like that was just when you were mentioning the teaching thing, I was thinking about like actions and things that you're not allowed to do or behaviors that you're not allowed to do. And I remember that popping into my head because I think I don't remember if I did it or some other little kid did it when I was little, but I remember someone getting in trouble because it was like you don't touch grown people's heads. Like it's not like you're patting them on their head. It's like you're calling them boy, you're calling them younger. Like they're not your mates. They're not the same age as you. And so I just remember I'm sorry, that just popped into my head because I remember thinking of behaviors that we were not allowed to do and certain things like that. But I do want to go back to the teaching. How do you think that made you? I kind of want to know your take on that growing up. Now that you're a little older, what you think of that? Because I know what I think of it, but I kind of want to understand how you feel about it now that you're kind of older.
I mean, I didn't really contest it. Like I didn't really think much about it growing up, but as I was growing up, of course, I had questions in my head, like, why can't I use certain words for certain people? Or like you said, I can't touch someone's head. Well, I know why, because it's because people keep saying that it's disrespectful, but at the end of the day, what makes it disrespectful? What like is how is like is like the head kind of like is kind of like the idea of touching a head, is it a way of violating respect, or if you're saying a certain word to someone who that is a word that you say with your peers, then maybe it breaks the differentiation between them and your peers, which make it disrespectful. um like there are many ways to explain it, but at the end of the day, I think it still goes back to age, to respect, to the idea of like the pyramid of elders. Like you got to respect whoever's older than you. Like I know for a fact that you have to, in America, when you see your teacher, you can just be like, "Hi, Mrs. Blank," or be like, "Oh, hi, what's up, Mister Whoever." But in other countries, especially I know for a fact in Vietnam, when you see your teacher, you don't just say "Hey," or you don't just be like, "What's up." You have to literally, you have a greeting. You have to say to them every single morning when you see them.
Yeah, I would personally think, I don't know what it is. It's the greeting period. I feel like in Nigeria, it's the greeting period that matters. I know that there's certain greetings that we use. Like I know that if you're asking someone, you know, how are you? We say the word kedu and ademais. Basically, how are you? I'm good. Um, and I didn't know this until I got a little bit older, but I went to spend some time with my grandmother, and there's a bigger community over there with a lot more older people there. And I was with my cousin, and I remember and I always thought it was just the greeting. Like I said, it's the greeting period because there is a good bit of English that's used. I mean, mostly the older people were the people that I saw that really just use the traditional. I would say the traditional or the home language to like greet each other and whatnot. But usually the younger people, I mean, you'd stick to English. So I always thought that just greeting them in general was important. Like you don't just like I was allowed to say good morning. I was allowed to say hello. It wasn't like a specific greeting that I had to give, but I did have to greet them. You never see somebody who's older than you and not acknowledge that they are there. Like even if it's just like a good afternoon, good morning, auntie, how are you doing? It you just have to acknowledge that they're there. But I didn't know
Oh
until I got
yes. That is one of the trip up that I had as well. Keep going and I'll tell you about my trip up with the greeting everybody thing. Keep going.
right. So I never thought it mattered. I thought there was, it was just a one greeting. And if they do happen to speak Igbo to me, respond to them as such. But then I realized later because I think one of the aunties that I met, she said something different to me. And I cannot remember the phrase that she used, but it was a different phrase than what I was used to. I expected her, like I said, to use the "How was your day?" and I answer her correctly in Igbo, uh, which is my home language in case you haven't caught on. Um, and so I heard something different and I was a little confused. And my cousin kind of stepped in and she answered like Mazi or something like that. She answered a different answer than I was used to. And so I had to kind of ask her, I was like, what is that? I grew up in America. This is speaking English. Like, and I even went home and asked my parents. I was like, what is that? I don't remember ever using that greeting. And apparently, that was a greeting that was supposed to be used for uh I don't want to be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure it was supposed to be for like older people. So apparently you don't just say, how's your day? What's up? How are you? So I guess the Kedu and Ademat thing was kind of more of and someone, if you are from Nigeria, feel free to correct me. And it might be different for different people, like I said. But apparently that was more of that greeting that I've been using my whole life was more of I guess that was more of the "what's up." And maybe over time everyone grew okay with it. But I know that for that specific auntie, I was meant to say a different type of greeting altogether. And I kind of just had to connect that, oh, okay, you know, that's the "hello, how are you doing" versus the "what's up, man? How's it going?" Like, it's the more formal version. And I didn't get that, like I said, until I had that interaction. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess so.
Well, isn't that interesting? Well, I think I have the same trip up. I'm going to go through this fast because I want to hear the next section where you have about the Japanese population going down. But yeah, I really just want to say that the idea of just greeting everyone, because you are a kid. You Anyone who's older around you, you must greet them. That is a show of respect. That is a show of courtesy. You have to do it. Otherwise, people are going to look at you like you're so disrespectful for some reason. And I'm just saying this is in my experience. And so my parents always tell me that I have to greet everyone. You don't just stand there and look at them. You have to say something, and you have to greet them accordingly. Like if how's your day, auntie, or how's your day, uncle? Like hello, auntie, hello, uncle. You have to say it in the respectful way. And as a kid, I was pretty introvert, and still today I'm pretty introvert. I'm just not like, so shy about what I say anymore. But it's like I was pretty shy as a kid. And so when approaching someone, it gets me very, very nervous. So I try to avoid it at all costs, which deem me getting a lot of scolding and reprimanding, because you don't do that. You don't avoid greetings. You have to greet them in a way that it wasn't really helpful towards my social skills. And in that, I just very much hate the idea of greetings and honorifics, just because it made me uncomfortable as a kid. And being reprimanded for not doing it and being called disrespectful for not doing it really got to me. And so after that, the honorifics and greetings really did do a number on me and how I approach certain peoples nowadays. Of course, now I don't really care anymore. I greet people if it's necessary. If it's not, then I just don't. Because right now I have a choice as I grow older. As a kid, I
Always
did
goes
have
back
that
to the older.
as a kid, I didn't have that freedom to choose, but now I can choose to walk out of the room and not really much can be done about it. But at the end of the day, like I said, I greet people that are necessary. If they don't come up to me, then I don't greet them. And now I really want to hear about the Japanese population. What's that about, Alyssa?
Oh, okay. So yeah, I did want to talk about that, and that's a very interesting, and actually that's a very good segue. You mentioning how you felt about that, like I don't know, maybe it's because it wasn't really that enforced in my house, or I understood the reasons. Like I said, my parents were vocal about the reasons why we do things, so it made me kind of more accepting, and I felt like I had a lot of pride when I did it. I was like, oh yes, and it made me feel unique and different because, like I said, growing up in America, it's different. You have your
Yeah,
the two pots. But
yeah.
the that's actually a very good segue into the population's going down. So as we know, if you've been listening across the news, we've got like in the US, I know we're having a problem now with abortion rights and things like that. And I don't know how it got into this, but I was sitting in one of my classrooms, right? And um, those of you who like are following the news and things that are happening around the world, you probably are aware of this. But I was sitting in my marketing class, and I don't remember how we got into this conversation. I think it was something to do with we were watching commercials and like analyzing them, and one of the commercials was called "Do It for Denmark." And I thought it was a joke when I first watched it. I was like, oh, this is like a parody or something, but it's actually real. And we were just speechless. All of us were just sitting there speechless. But it's
Wait. There is an actual ad out there that tells you to do it for your country.
yes, there's actually apparently there's also like and I don't want to be wrong about this. I really want to look it up to make sure I'm not wrong, but they give in certain countries they're giving incentives for people to have more babies because
They
apparently the population is going down. Same in Japan apparently, because apparently now they have a very strict hierarchy system there and whatnot, and they've your people are living very long there. The problem isn't necessarily that people are living long, it's that people are living long, but there's not enough reproduction going on, so there's not enough children to take over. There's more older people than there are youth.
they literally are creating benefits for you to have kids. Oh my God.
And Denmark's not the only place. There were several places that were doing it, and it also had me thinking. I think that's where we got into the conversation when I was in class, because I was like, I wonder if that's why in the U.S. they're trying to stop the whole abortion thing, is that they're afraid we're going to end up like many of these other countries. Funny enough, the most of the thing that's keeping us from ending up like many of these other countries where they don't have enough kids is the fact that immigration is a thing. And I found that
Oh,
very
isn't that
ironic.
hilarious? Isn't that ironic? Oh,
Yeah,
I
it was
love that.
extremely ironic. Like in a country built of immigrants. Yeah, but I just found that very interesting. And like I said, I thought this was a parody. I didn't believe this was real. I was like, people are actually like the population is actually going down. Like, and they have like a bunch of different things. If you guys want to look into it, it's a very interesting thing to read about. Basically trying to figure out why in the world this is happening. And it's just like, oh, people are overworked, most people, women have the, and I was very iffy about this specific point where it's like, oh, women are allowed to get education, they're allowed to work now, you're not really dependent, you dependent on your husband, you don't really have to stay home and have babies anymore, you have other things you want to do. And it's kind of hard to have kids, it is harder to have a child and have a career to focus. I personally think it would that specific reason was kind of bull crap. It was a very interesting argument that I saw that was had, about, and to a certain extent it kind of made sense that, if you're not having to be at home all the time, if you're actually working, you're creating a career for yourself and whatnot, of course, having a kid is kind of the last thing on your minds. But that's I don't think it's a big enough, like, if we were, and I'm starting to work in data, so if we were putting these all in like plot points or whatnot, or if we put this in like a scatter plot, I don't feel like that's a relevant enough reason to have, there's not enough to back that up for you to be saying that that's a good reason why this is happening.
No,
I
it's
believe
not.
more
It
in
is
the
completely irrelevant if you ask me. And it's not because I am mad or upset because they're saying that independent women can't have kids or something, but it's really so irrelevant that you can compare the modernism of life into the decrease as a reason to decrease your population. That is just so weird.
right. I believed more so that it was everyone being overworked and underpaid. There was one that was like, basically you're overworked and underpaid, and I believed more so that it
Yeah.
was probably
Yeah.
everyone is overworked. You're just always on the go. When do you really have time to even sit down? And by the time you get home from the long hours, you're tired, you're knocked out. Nobody's trying to really create a child, and then having a child is really expensive, which is why I don't see why they're sitting here trying to say,
Yeah,
let's
because I mean, if you work long hours and you're not getting enough profit, you're not getting enough out of your wages, then of course having a kid is the last thing on your mind. You don't want to become one of those countries where you work so hard, like you work so hard and you're not barely earning and you have to support a family of three or something. That is not the goal here. I mean, I understand you need people, you need the population, but being able to arrange your life accordingly is also very important.
and that's the thing. That's the thing, is that in some of these other countries that I was talking about, like even in the Do It for Denmark uh commercial that I saw, they were actually giving
I'm gonna go
money
look
to
it up.
people.
By the way, I'm gonna go back and look at that ad. By the way, not that
you
you've
you
hurt my
should. It was you should. It was very interesting. Like I said, I was like stuck on that, and I was like looking up all the different countries where the population is going down supposedly, and it was very fascinating to me. But like, definitely, definitely, like, I in some of the countries they were even giving people money, like if you have a kid at a certain time or something like that, they were giving you money to take care of it. Which, funny enough, I was like, funny enough, America was like, let's get rid of abortion, but they're not going to give you money to take care of that kid. I really feel like the only person who's going to suffer if that law passes is the child. uh it's kind of iffy as far as I'm concerned. But like I said, but the point I was making when I was trying to tie that into our conversation today, talking about how the population is going down, is, like I said, the problem not being that, that people are not living as long. People are living longer, or even just as long, living to pretty good ages, 80, 90, and all of that. But here's the problem, is that you don't have any young people to take over when you're gone, because it is inevitable, one day you will be gone. And so that also kind of made me think about some of the strict hierarchies that are present, like around the world. And this is, I would, like I said, I'm not excluding the US from this because there are some rocky problems as well. Like I said, the hierarchy in America is not very defined at all. It's pretty loose. The hierarchies, the honorifics, the greetings, they exist, but you're not as strictly bound to them as you would be in other places. But I like I said, everyone's got tick for tack their own issues. But it ties back to what you were saying in your story when you said that you're not allowed to use the word teach with an older person because a younger person, by definition, you have not been alive long enough. I call it a pain game, the pain game, comparing each other's suffering. You haven't suffered on this earth long enough. You haven't learned enough to teach me, who has been here 50 years, anything. And I'm like, honestly, and I'm gonna short bring in another
By the
another
way,
thing
let me
says,
just cut in by the way because I am watching this ad right now.
oh my gosh.
And it is so weird. It looks like I don't know what to tell you. It looks like one like all the cheesy rom-com in the 1990s combined. I don't know what to tell you. It
Right.
is
That's why I
so
thought it was a parody. I thought
cheesy.
it was I thought somebody was like joking, and I was like, oh no, you're being serious.
It is so freaking cheesy. It is so weird. And it's like I can't stop laughing. It's like it's a rom-com.
But
It's literally
I mean, I guess if you're talking about the population, though, you don't want to be like all heavy and whatnot. That's a pretty good way.
whoever thought of this, I want to meet them. I want to work with them. We're going to create some good content. Oi, I
Right,
love
genius,
this.
genius.
I love this. Yeah, yeah, keep going. You have one last point, don't you? You have one last point about wisdom, don't you?
Yes, I do. Like right after this. But yeah, I definitely want to insert the other thing that I saw that happened in Japan. It was another article that I saw where there were kids who basically they carry a lot of books. For those of you who don't know, school is so different all around the world, but Japan in general, like I always thought their school system was kind of cool, but also like it is extremely challenging. And you know, they have long hours in school, and often apparently it's very hard to carry around all of these how the books that they're needing. And so there were these kids who had invented, they literally were kids working together in, I guess, a club in grade school, and they created these book bags basically that were they created like extensions in their book bags so that kids wouldn't have to carry and be hunched over and have back pain. They could just roll around there. It kind of like a rolly bag almost. And I thought it was very creative and very nice that these kids were able to create this and give it to their classmates and talk about how it would make things better for kids. But here's what I didn't like: the response from the older generation, the elders, was to basically chastise these kids and say, this is lazy. Basically, we had to walk with a bunch of backpacks, like we had to walk with a ton of bricks on our back. Why in the world would you think that you would not have to go through the same thing? Like, this is not disciplined, this is not good. It was just the words that they were using. And I'm going to tie this back to what you said in your story about that, because I that's what popped into my mind. That story popped into my mind along with the do it for Denmark and all of that popped into my mind when you were talking about that, about how the population is going down. You have a lot of old people, a lot of people with wisdom. They've lived through things, but you don't have anyone to pass it down to. There's less and less youths that are taking to this, and when they actually do want to create something, make something to make things better, your response is you haven't. It's the response they gave you. You haven't suffered enough to teach me. You haven't suffered enough to come up with something good. You haven't lived long enough to come up with something that's new and creative. It's I don't know. It kind of bothers me. It's very and this is not, like I said, there's probably tons of stories, and if and I'm pretty sure everyone has that personal story that they've lived through that's like kind of didn't make sense to you. This is not just Japan. This is like around the world. And like I said, you can even find this kind of behavior in the US, where it's like anytime something new comes in, some kind of new innovation, it's they don't say it out of their mouths in the US, but it's basically there whenever somebody says, "Oh, why in the like when I was younger we had to do this," and they're not telling it as a story. They're telling you that, why do you think you're allowed to do this when I did this when I was younger? And to some extent, it makes sense. I agree that some things should stay the same. There is a culture that should be kept, but when you're trying to stop progress because you didn't have it, I I can't understand that mentality. And I feel like in respecting your elders, it's hard to respect someone who is, I guess, being, it feels petty to me
It
that you
is.
don't want anything to progress because you didn't have that when you were younger. And especially because, funny enough, the people who are supposed to be inventing these things are the elder generation. You have the experience. And so, because you have that experience, I feel like, the reason you had that experience so you could make things better. But the problem is, once you make things better, I don't know if it's some kind of jealousy or pettiness that comes up, that you don't want the person after you to have that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very petty. I do think it is. It is a bias based on experience, really. And by the way, I actually saw a second ad. It's also a Do It for Denmark ad. It is a second ad. It's called Do It for Mom. So it's basically, I don't know why I got down this another rabbit hole
Oh
after
my
I got a whole different rabbit
god.
hole. This is a whole different rabbit hole, people. But basically, this ad, this is a second Denmark Do It for Denmark ad, but it's called Do It for Mom. So basically, you have this old grandma just sitting there. She wants grandchildren so bad that she actually helps her daughter to have to literally have sex, to have more children, for her to have grandbabies, and
Oh, I think we watched that one too.
it's so hilarious. I can't believe it. Alyssa, you dug me a whole nother tunnel into what I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's fascinating, and we learned so many things. Like, I love my business classes, man. We get into some. You would think that it would be all crunching numbers and whatever, but we get into some very interesting topics because I'm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I like this. So far, I enjoy the laugh. But yeah, since like I think we have really gone through all of our points. So do you have like maybe like a summary for everyone? Do you have any like last words for everyone before we exit this rabbit hole?
Yeah, because we are coming to time for our down the rabbit hole series. I do want to quickly just go over collectivistic versus individualistic society, just because we said we would talk about it. I'm gonna do that quickly, and then we can put in some last words there, because I think living longer means more wisdom. I think, like I said, I just summarized that basically in the Do It for Denmark and all of the different articles I just threw out there. Basically, just living longer means more wisdom, and wisdom means more respect. But it's hard to respect you if you're not going to use the wisdom to help others down the line, and you're just going to complain about it. To some extent, the younger generation can be brats, but your parents probably thought you were brats as well. We're brats for having phones, but like I said, our parents were probably considered brats for having cars. You don't walk 5 miles to school. How dare you? How dare you not want to have blisters and corns on your feet? And you know what? Their parents probably said the same thing about you. You wash your clothes in a bucket. How dare you use a bucket instead of the river and get eaten by sharks and probably whatever else is swimming in there? Like, how dare you?
Sharks doesn't live in river, Alyssa.
There are there freshwater sharks? There are freshwater sharks, probably not in the rivers, but you get what I'm saying. It keeps going in generation. That's why I say you'll never be old enough. Every generation is gonna have, and we're gonna do it to the next generation too. We've actually already started all these reboots of these movies. Oh my gosh, gross. But you get the point. But real quick, I do want to go over collectivistic and individualistic societies. So we mentioned that honorifics, most of them have to do with family, especially if you're from the east side of the world. And I think that's because we do have more collectivistic societies. Collectivistic meaning, okay, so I'm going to actually look it up so I don't give a bad definition. Okay, so collectivistic being basically, by definition, the practice or principle of giving a group priority over each individual in it. So basically prioritizing the whole. So a lot of, and we're going to use the word foreign again, because like I said, that means different things to different people. But say in versus, I think the US is a very good example. The US is a great example of individualistic society. No one here is going to judge you really off of what your parents did. I mean, everyone judges you based off of what, was in your past, but it's not such a huge thing. No one is connected enough. No one is together enough to where I know 5 generations ago what your great grandfather did or who he was to everyone. No one cares over here, really and honestly. It really is. And I know it's like a propaganda thing that we really sell to other people, because in some ways I do feel like a lot of America's propaganda isn't necessarily it's not necessarily to a T exactly what they're selling to everyone, but to a certain extent, it is kind of true that, you do kind of forge your own path here. And no, it's a nice story to hear what your grandfather did, but it's not so important that you're going to be shunned for it. Like I do remember, like, a lot of my friends, especially that had like foreign parents, Indian, African descent, Asian descent, talking about, they said their parents would always, come up with, and even one of my favorite YouTubers, she's Indian, and she would always say, the thing that bothered her the most when she was younger is her parents saying, what will people think? What would people think? But if you think about it, on the east side of the world, there's more of a collectivistic culture, more of calling everyone auntie, grandma, everyone is family. And so everyone is kind of pitching in and working together. And in a sense, that is really, really good. I love the fact that everyone is so close, but it also, it can create a lot of problems, in a sense where you'll get that sentence, what will people think? It's always about what everyone else thinks, because the support group that you need, great people have come from great support groups, great backgrounds. It takes a village to raise a child. But when that small group of people or that group of family is all you have, as a support group, it's very it is very tough to really branch out from that small group or that community that you're a part of. It's hard to find yourself and be yourself and be an individual, because it's always about what everyone else wants over what you want. And I feel like in America, that's why I said the US would probably be the best place to compare it to, because in the US, it is more about what you want rather than what everyone else wants. Although, in a way, it does create very selfish tendencies, I will say. But there's ups and downs to each one. Like I said, you find yourself, you become a little bit more selfish. You don't find yourself, you're working for the greater good, amazing. But at the same time, you never really have, some people never find their own identity. And I feel like that's a little sad. But that is what I wanted to mention about collectivism. That's why I feel like, most of the honorifics are follow family, because like I said, it's about the group, it's about the whole, everyone, as opposed to you as an individual. So that's why it's, let's refer to each other as family, because that is what we will be, the support group. And in some countries that's needed. In that environment, it makes sense. In an environment like America, it doesn't really make that much sense to have a collectivistic society. But that's my wrap on that. In in contrast to like respecting your elders, I feel like that's my wrap on that. Like I said, uh, older means wisdom. Wisdom to me means you should be using whatever experiences you had to make things better for the people who can use it, even if you yourself cannot use it. And wow, Yamauba was such fun and interesting rabbit hole to climb down.
It is. And my last remark would be I found a third ad to do it
Oh
for
my god,
Denmark.
third one?
It's called Do It Forever, and it has these two older couples doing it on the beach. I'm so happy.
No. Okay,
Go
you're gonna
and
have to
look
send
it
me
up.
these links when we're done.
Go and look it up. It's called Do It Forever, and it's a third Do It for Denmark ad. So just go and look it up, guys. That's my last remark for the day. I'm so giggly right now. I can't stop. It's so weird. But yeah.
Should have been checked out this whole time watching the commercials for population control.
Yep. I don't know what to tell you. I climb in a whole another hole, so I don't even know what to tell you.
We might do another down the rabbit hole on just on population control.
We should.
Oh my
We
god.
should. But in the meantime, We will see you guys again on New Year's Eve, December the 31st, because that's the only time we have free. And we will bring you guys a farewell episode for the country of Japan, because we are leaving Japan. Because
Very
we
soon.
Yeah, we usually do maybe 4 episode, 5 episode per country mythology, and then we move on to another country. And that's kind of how we've been doing it for a while. So December 31st would be our last episode for Japan. And we will see you guys then. In the meantime, have fun, enjoy your holidays. We will be enjoying ours. And look up the Do It for Denmark ad. It is hilarious.
No, no. I mean, no.
Do it, do it, do it.
Do it
I
for
just want to.
Denmark.
Alrighty,
Definitely.
guys. Alrighty, and that will be it for Down the Rabbit Hole. We will see you again. Bye, mortals.
Bye, mortals.